you have to teach them all how to play at the back. And I think the best players are the ones that got to play at the back at a young age.
They have to.
For me, the best players, all of the best players play as it. But because they haven't put in all that effort throughout this time, they're actually not that good at defending, right? So I think especially for those guys, put them at the back. Let them fail.
Really?
Yes. I like to not call players defenders or attackers. Specifically, like, what position are you going to play? You're a defender. That's not a position. Right? Everybody's a defender. Like, in training, you've got to really teach the game, principles of the game that apply in any situation. Right? Not like, here, this is how you play this position.
Correct.
This is how you play this position. Like, this position might not even exist when you're playing later on, right? Because as a youth coach, you've got to do what's best by the player, not what's best by the team, right? Because young kids take it very literal. So if they say, play at the back, play at the back.
Yeah.
Right? So now you're kind of limiting their movement. And when they're learning principles, I don't want to limit them. I just want them to run freely. At the youngest ages, it's playing at the back as the most responsibility. I still think overall, like, the goalkeeper position is the most important position in the game.
All right. This is Ivo Toka, and this podcast is about providing coaches with resources to become better coaches and produce better players. And once again, we have Santiago. And Santiago, if you could just start off with answering the first question, which is, can it be harmful or beneficial to a player when a coach makes an effort to have that player play one position most of the time?
Yeah, I think the short answer is harmful. It's better to play multiple positions, but I think you also have to hone a skill and really develop it in order to maximize your potential, right? So I think it's about playing multiple positions, but doing it where you master one, then you go and master another one, then you go and master another one, right? And the level of mastery is relevant to the age group, right? We're not talking about center midfielder, 8 years old, you have to play like Toni Kroos. No, right? You just have to be proficient as a center midfielder at that age.
Okay.
Right.
And on that, so when you're saying master this, man, are you saying he should only play one position, master that, then later play another position, master that, then later play? Okay, so not like play all 2 or 3 positions during the same time frame.
For me, to give you a quick example, right? I think when you play and you're focusing on the principles of play at a young age, and I always start when I think about a player's development in terms of a team structure, I always think about 6, 7 years old, right? U7. So at that age, when you're teaching the player with the ball, right? You want him to penetrate, right? By dribbling, passing, or shooting. Right? So when you're working on the principle at that age, I don't think positions are necessary at all.
When you say principle, are you talking about that specific aspect of dribbling forward?
So I like to break down the game into principles of specifically for kids that are younger with the player with the ball, right? And then the supporting player. But really at that age group, it's just about the player with the ball because they're just developing that, right?
Okay.
So the first principle is penetrate, right? You want to try to go forward, right? Penetrate the defense, go through the defense, right? There's a lot of different terminology, but I think that's a terminology that U.S. Soccer was using about 10 years ago.
Okay.
Right? So with that, then I don't think any type of principle that you're teaching, right? Whether it's, you can move on to, say, U10, U11, and now it's when under pressure in the build-up in the middle third, right? When you've got pressure on your back, play the way you face, right? That might be a principle, right? You receive, you have pressure on your back, play the way you face. It's a law, right?
Okay.
So I think any principle that you teach, when you're teaching principles, just the principles, what I like to do is not make it positional.
Okay.
Right? Just teach the principle. Right? But then that might be in a practice setting when you're teaching. Right? But then, so in that regard, the players are going to get, because it's not a structured environment where you play this position, I play this one. You're going to get multiple positional experiences in a practice setting.
Yeah.
right? So you want to make sure that in a practice, they're not just playing at the back and doing, defender exercises, or not just playing at the front, but seeing the game from all multiple different perspectives. And I think the easiest way to do that is playing small-sided games, right? So you're playing at the back, you're playing at the front, you're playing at the right. That can be within a span of 10 seconds, right?
Yeah.
Three.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's where you can teach, and I think you can start teaching positions even in a small-sided game, but it doesn't mean it has to be a fixed position, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think the big thing is, obviously, when you go to a competitive structure, right, where now you're playing against another team, you're playing for a result, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's young kids, right? You go and you play against another team. We're not at practice anymore. We're trying to win, right? And that comes into that philosophy, that whole discussion as well. Like, should 6-7-year-olds go out to win, or should you just be playing like you're playing practice? For me, you have to try to do something a little bit different, right? Like cover yourself a little bit differently. And the big thing is the transition from attack to defense, right? If you have a player that always stays back, say in a 3v3, you're going to be more successful.
Yeah.
Right. So you give two players the freedom to run anywhere, and then one player always stays back.
Yeah.
Right. Because when you lose the ball, you're always going to have a player there to try to stop the other team. Right. So I think there is where you start learning positions. Right. And for me, like the first position, right, because they can't really pass the ball when they're just starting to play the game. Right. It's more dribbling. So you're not really, like, when you ask a forward to stay at the front, but his teammate can't pass it to him, it's a little bit counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think you start by teaching everyone needs to learn how to play at the back.
Okay.
Right?
So are you saying, so in practice, and let me see if I'm understanding, in practice, small-sided games, but there's no fixed position, meaning any player can play anywhere?
Yeah, when you're teaching principles.
Yeah.
That's how I like to do it, right? When you're teaching a principle, any principle, right? Say it's support, right? So you want to support based on the pressure that the ball carrier has.
Yeah.
So if the ball carrier doesn't have pressure, if the pressure is far away, I want to stay away, stay on the line for the pass.
Correct.
So let's say we're teaching that, right? I don't want to try to get into their mind about, hey, you have to stay in this position, you have to stay in that one, because then all of a sudden they're not making decisions about where to run, right? Because young kids take it very literal. So if they say play at the back, play at the back.
Yeah.
Right? So now you're kind of limiting their movement. And when they're learning principles, I don't want to limit their movement. I just want them to run freely. Right? Like, support, if this player has the ball, right? Go away, higher up the field if possible, on a line for the pass. And all of a sudden, the player that's at the back is saying, wait, hold on a second. You told me that when he has time, I run forward. But why do I have to stay at the back? So, because there's multiple layers to it, right? But I just want them to learn that principle. So I'm going to focus on that, right? Then there comes a part of training where now we say, okay, we're going to practice like in a game setting, right? So now we're going to practice playing at the back. Okay. So one guy stays at the back. The other three guys, you're going to apply these principles. The other guy, just support underneath. Now you're teaching this player how to play at the back. You're teaching the other players how to play at the front, per se. Right?
Now,
4v4, 3v3.
Now, is it the same player playing at the back, or is it different players playing at the back?
Well, I think you have to teach them all how to play at the back. And I think the best players are the ones that got to play at the back at a young age.
They have to.
For me, the best players, all of the best players play.
And why is that?
It's just my experience from what I've seen.
Wait, hold on. You're saying they should, not they do.
I'm saying, I don't know what percentage it is, but I just look at, right, over the course of the past 12 years when I've been coaching, every player that has made it far played at the back when they were young.
Oh, okay. So you're recognizing a pattern.
There's a definite pattern. For me, you learn a certain sense of responsibility and a perspective about the game at that age. The other aspect of it is, a lot of the time, the guys at the back are the ones that touch the ball more.
Correct.
They're young.
That's true.
Right? Because like we go back to the same thing.
That's true.
We don't have guys, the whole team can't pass the ball to the guy up there.
Correct.
Doesn't have the passing range. So we tell the guy to wait up there. you're just over there, picking daisies, right? Like you're not really involved in the game at that young age when you're high up the field. So I think it's important that everyone gets to experience that in terms of playing at the back, being the guy responsible to, hey, give me the ball, I'm gonna bring it in.
That's why that's interesting because when I do it, like for example, if I have a player and I know that they just have zero defense, I'm not putting him at the back.
Yeah.
Like I know at the top of my head, if I have a 4-on-4, one of them is like they're not going to be able to stop anything.
Right.
So, but you're saying, so is that like every player plays in the back no matter what, or does it depend on the player?
I mean, I think when a player's good, if a player's talented, like if a player's a beginner or doesn't have that much ability,
A
beginner player,
or
doesn't have that much ability, right? There's a social component where if you put too much responsibility on that player, right, which at the youngest ages it's playing at the back is the most responsibility. I still think overall, like the goalkeeper position is the most important position in the game, right? And it's at the back because it's the most like responsibility bearing position, right? So if you put a new player that doesn't know what they're doing compared to the rest of the players at the back, they're gonna fail because they're gonna feel like they let everybody down, and then from a social, component, they're gonna leave the game.
yeah,
So I think when you're just introducing them, I don't think it's good. But there comes a moment where, you have to play them at the back.
that is interesting.
But overall, right, there also is a different dynamic. Like that's beginner players. There's a different dynamic, which is players that are talented with the ball, and maybe because their parents have told them, no, you don't play at the back, you're a forward.
Yeah,
like classic.
I hear that a lot.
Right? Like classic. Like, no, you're a forward. You're good with the ball, you're a forward. So then they don't try when they play at the back. Right? They don't try, or they don't.
Oh yeah,
they don't apply themselves. They don't apply themselves as much,
so that they don't get
or they're simply talented with the ball, but because they haven't put in all that effort throughout all this time, they're actually not that good at defending. Right? So I think especially for those guys, put them at the back. Let them fail.
Really?
Yes, because that's how you're going to get responsibility. How do you then expect them to, when they're U12, to be at the front and just chasing everyone down and leading the line and pressing and pressing and pressing and pressing and pressing and having that defensive work rate? At a young age, you can't develop that defensive work rate by playing at the front, for the most part.
Yeah, I would agree.
For the most part.
I would agree.
Of course, you could have, in a 4v4 game, you could have 8 top players, and the game looks different than the average U7 game. But for the most part, right, at a young age, you've got a couple good players that are above the rest, and the game is very dribble oriented and not, so that doesn't create a high pressing, and you can't develop the work rate at the front.
That's so interesting because, to be honest, like of the first team for 17s I have, for the strong, which I like that what you're saying, it makes sense, but my strongest players didn't play center defender.
Yeah.
Which now when I hear what you're saying in terms of responsibility, touches on the ball, where it makes sense to rotate them there, because what I did is I played the best tackler there, and then he's not as good going forward as the other players. So now
he's not invited to take any risks. Right, he's not invited to dribble too much.
Actually, on my team he is. So he scores. Okay, that's not typical, but he scores goals.
Yeah.
But my thinking was, let's put the more better advanced players up front. But now that I hear what you say, it makes a lot of sense.
I think when you're forming a team, right, you want to kind of put them in their natural roles, right? The players have a natural tendency.
Yes,
if a player is better at tackling or more risk averse, plays more at the back. And I think once you kind of consolidate the team and the team's got a certain amount of chemistry and they understand each other, I think you can just outright tell them, and most people also tell their parents, like, look, we've developed a good team in these positions. Now we're gonna rotate them, and we're gonna master different roles. And now it's gonna make us a more dynamic team.
That's interesting. So when a player plays at the back, and I want to get this, when a player plays at the back, they learn that they can't just run all over the place, because if they do, there's gonna be more punishment due to their lack of responsibility than anybody else.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not only that, it's how to bring the ball in, right?
Correct,
It's how
yeah.
to take less risks when
Mm-hmm.
you're under higher pressure in front of your own goal. I think there's a lot of, and then also marking, how important marking is, because if you don't mark somebody in front of your own goal,
Mm-hmm.
it's a goal.
Correct, automatically. Whereas a forward, you can get away with
If a
it.
forward doesn't mark,
Yeah.
it's all right. You know, doesn't, you don't see the result right away.
Mm-hmm.
So that might manifest itself like years down the line, where a player has just been playing on the front, is their responsibility of marking hasn't been that great, because and then all of a sudden on a corner, they keep losing their man over and over. Well, they haven't been marking for the whole life. They've just been marking now. Now that the opponent learned how to whip the ball in the air, now I'm having to mark this guy on a corner, right? And then all of a sudden I'm not that good at it.
And I bet you also at that point when the field gets big enough on corners, they probably don't even come back. The coaches probably just stay up the field.
Well, it depends on the level, right? Like I think, like for example, like we were talking about the U14s that were in the DAS Cup final against Frankfurt. They conceded on 3 corners. Like they played really well, right? Like quarterfinal, they beat FC Dallas Academy 1-0. Competitive game, right? Both teams had a lot of chances. Back and forth game. The separator was in the final against Frankfurt. Again, both teams had a lot of chances. They controlled more the first half. We controlled more the second half. In corners, there was a big difference. Like their discipline to mark and our discipline not to mark. It was just an example in that sense.
Yeah.
But I think it's just a good picture of like years down the line how things can something that you didn't learn from a young age later on catches up.
So let me ask you this then, because I want to make sure that I'm understanding right. So let's say there's 4 players, all have good ability. The only difference is athleticism. So let's say the least athletic player who can't really defend, you still put him center defender.
I don't think that the athleticism has anything to do with it. I mean, I think because you're ultimately, right, you want to develop them all to maximize their ability. So,
but what if he's not like a good tackler? You know what I mean?
Where's he going to learn how to tackle? At the front or at the back?
More at the back, he's going to get tons of opportunities.
Right. So that's where I think you have to, obviously for your own team, because winning, there's a price of not winning as well, right? So if you're putting him in games, in important games, and you're having him learn in important games, then maybe you lose the rest of the team. The rest of the team is not as engaged.
You see,
maybe he's not as engaged. So then you have to learn how to maybe do it in practice and be like, hey, look, you're going to learn.
Or games where you're up.
But you have to explain it. I think the biggest thing is with parents, right? So, hey, in training sessions, you're going to play at the back because that's where you're going to learn to have a high work rate defensively and mix that up. And then what's going to happen is 2 months down the line, right, when you're playing as a forward in a game, all of a sudden now we have 4 players in the game that can all tackle instead of 3.
Yeah.
Right? All of a sudden now, as a team, we've raised the level. And some parents will be open-minded to that, and some won't. And my experience is that the parents that are not, they pass that mentality onto the kids, and the kids are closed-minded as well.
Correct.
And it's not even worth wasting your time.
Yeah.
Like if the parent is not willing to be open-minded and say to the kid, look, you've got to do what the coach says, learn whatever position they're asking you, then it's probably not worth your time.
Man, man, that helps me. So like, cause there's a player now that you say that this responsibility where, because I play him in forward, like most of the time, he can lose the ball and he doesn't understand like the significance of losing the ball. Whereas if he's a defender, he understands, oh, I'll lose it. It goes right in the net. So now I can't just take it and dribble because the last 5 times I did it, 4 times they scored.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the big things is like when this is all about developing a complete player, right? So when this total football type of thing from Cruyff, like he calls every player is an attacker. Every player in the field is an attacker.
Yeah.
And every player in the field is a defender.
Correct. Yeah.
Right? So I like to not call players, defenders, or attackers specifically. Like, what position are you going to play? You're a defender. That's not a position, right? Everybody's a defender.
Correct.
Right? What position are you going to play? Center back.
Okay.
Right? When we have the ball, you attack.
Okay.
When they have the ball, you defend.
I see.
Right? Like everybody else.
I see.
Right?
Makes
So I think that terminology has an impact as well. Like, we can't call kids like, you're a defender. No, you're a player.
Mm-hmm.
There's all of a sudden now they put themselves in this bucket,
and
it's hard to evolve from that.
Man, but also on what you said, now that it's clicking too, like when you see a lot of, and I'm talking about the highest level, like playmakers, they're so comfortable getting the ball from the back, like dropping deep and getting it. But yeah, that's a good point. And on this topic as well, do you think there is any advantage to be gained by a kid by specializing in one position?
Definitely. I mean, I think eventually you have to specialize. Just about when.
And about when would that be for you?
I think it's different for every player, and because every player is going to.
So it's not dependent on the age.
I don't think there's a strict age, but I think there's a maturity point, right? For some players, it might be 13, 14, 15, right? I think that's around the time where by 15, like, you need to have a certain idea. But then you also see, like, you see kids that at 15 for their club team are playing as a center midfielder. And then, they play as a center midfielder from 15 to 18, right? Even playing MLS Next or playing, high level academy, ECNL, whatever it is. And then going to get recruited to play college, and then all of a sudden are playing right back.
Yeah.
Or playing as a center back.
Often. Yeah.
Right? That's not uncommon. And I think that's more of a dynamic here in the States, because I think we're still, this goes deeper, right? But why is it that the players that make it through are always center midfielders?
What do you mean make it through to the next level?
Like a lot of players. I'm not saying all.
Yeah, because I would say they get so many aspects of the game. They got to defend, they got to attack, they got to go left, they got to go right. They get they're always involved in so many aspects.
And if you think about other countries, right? And you, like, let's just put, for example, like Germany or Spain, right? It's not all center midfielders that make it through. And I think the reason for that is that their teaching is a little bit more holistic. Right?
Oh, yeah.
They teach players all aspects of the game in training sessions, right? And they're not limiting them to, here, train like this, just play in this position.
Correct.
That's kind of what I was talking about before. Like, in training, you've got to really teach the game, principles of the game that apply in any situation, right? Not like, here, this is how you play this position.
Correct.
This is how you play this position. Like, this position might not even exist when you're playing later on.
That's another thing. I
want
to talk to you about that. No, this is so important because I just thought about this too, and it was the significance of players not playing a single position. And if you could touch on that lightly, because that's so important. Because my next question was, I bet you parents ask, is why isn't it okay for a player to master and specialize one position? Isn't that an advantage? But if you could go on to what you said, because I think that's so important as far as why it is important for players to play multiple positions, because I tell that to parents too, that you don't want one kid playing one position, but I wasn't thinking on the level that you were thinking. So if you could explain why that's so important.
I think, to put it simply, specializing in one position at a certain age is beneficial.
At a certain age, yeah.
I do think that it's beneficial. But I think before you do that, right, and this is where we're talking about the maturity, like, what's your maturity like as a soccer player? Sometimes that maturity could come at 10 years old. Like, this player understands how to bring the ball from the back, understands how to switch the play, understands how to, probe on one side, play short passes, and then play on the other side, understands how to shoot from the outside, fake the shot, and then dribble, go on the inside, understands how to, play out wide and then run late to cross. There's players that at 10, 11 years old have all that. So then you can say, okay, what is this player looking like he's going to play? And there's a little bit of a guessing game, right? For an educated guess, for coaches that have experience doing that can see kind of the growth patterns and can look at their parents and say, hey, look, like, physically, this is what he looks like. What's advantageous to play?
Yeah.
Because you have a player like that can play any position at a young age.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe now you start focusing on this.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right?
Like,
so
if you know he's not going to be tall and he's going to be short, don't blame center back.
Or don't play goalkeeper.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think those are things that for height, I think obviously center back there's a big advantage of being tall because you can react quicker to hitting the ball out and you need to be able to head the ball out. But also there's an advantage of being low center of gravity. I don't think that as a center back we should put as much stock.
I actually agree.
But again, it just depends on how you want to play. I think you do want physical presence at the back. If that physical presence, that person is not as tall, it doesn't matter.
It's like a Mascherano.
But you've got to be a physical
for Barcelona.
But he was a physical presence.
He was a physical presence. But I'm just saying he's short.
Exactly.
With very
height is not necessarily.
Yeah. He's good in the air.
Yeah,
good out
exactly. That's another thing. Like if you're short, you have to be good in the air. You
Yeah.
can't be short and not good in the air.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
But yeah, I think there comes a point in terms of your maturity, IQ wise as a soccer player, where once that maturity, you hit that point in your maturity, then you can specialize.
Okay. And then also going back a little into it because I don't know if I mentioned this to you last time, but there used to be a number 10 position that was common in most of the top teams. You had players like Ozil, James, Ronaldinho played there at the time. Ronaldinho was able to make the transition, but you saw kind of players like Ozil and James, they had to transition in the middle of their careers because now we were playing a different three in the middle as opposed to a number 10. And it was difficult for them to adjust. So that's one thing that I think you mentioned that is so important in playing multiple positions. So why I ask you is like, at what age do you specialize? Is because like, let's say a player is mature at 12 years old, but he plays like a number 10 from the time he's 12 to the time he's 18. But then when he's 21, it's a completely different formation. Or are you still going to play him in at least two positions? Or
I think you've got to, be able to adapt to different systems because you don't know what coach you're going to play for that might have a different system and you don't know how the game is going to evolve. Right? So I think that's kind of the best way to put it. Those are the two things that you can't control. You can't control what the coach is going to, what system the coach is going to play. You also can't control if, for example, this coach plays within a system that has a number 10, let's say 4-4-2 diamond.
Yeah.
So you have a 10 behind two strikers and you're a number 10. So you're like, great. But then all of a sudden there's a kid that's better than you.
Yeah.
It's like, well, can you play as a number 8?
Yeah.
So if you can't, then you're in the bench.
Yeah.
So I think that because it's a team game, right? Like if it's an individual game, it's a little bit different. Like if you're playing tennis, right? Like I can develop as an individual tennis player, like however I want, as long as it's efficient.
Yeah.
Right. But in a team game, you've got to be able to play multiple roles. It's like in any sport thing. Like if you're a point guard, right? Like I'm just a point guard. Well, if you're just a point guard and you're going to bring the ball up and you're always been passing it to the guy that can shoot, right? But you can't shoot. All of a sudden there's a better point guard. You're out of the team.
100%.
So you've got to be a dynamic. And I think as a whole, right, as this information era is here to, and we get access to everyone's development guide and we get access to, all of these different techniques. I think players are becoming more and more well-rounded, both technically and physically. I think in general, players are better, more well-rounded.
Now, are you talking about within America or just like
in general, in the world?
Okay.
Yeah, in America as well, compared to before.
I don't know. You may know better than me.
I mean, look at the, for example, like, I mean, we can look at whatever team, but for example, look at the U.S. national team, right? Like, look at the players and the multiple roles that they can play, right? Like for example, Weston McKennie, like against Jamaica, he played as a right back.
Yeah, he can play multiple.
Right, he can play as a right back. He can play as a 10. He can play as a 6. Pulisic can play on the right. Can play on the left. Can play as a 10. Right, you've got guys that can play.
Aronson probably also can play multiple.
Yeah, can play all over the midfield.
Yeah,
right. You've got overall, but I think also that's going to become more and more and more in the next 10 years.
Now, do you think within the previous 10 or 20 years, it was players specializing more?
I mean,
or was that ever really a
I think
thing?
definitely there's different cultures that allow for more positional interchange.
Mm.
Like if you go to, Spain or Germany really after the 2002 World Cup where they had their like revolution, right? They also changed the way that they were teaching. Right, Germany before was more position specific, right? And you had these German teams that were like get the ball wide, cross it, get the big guy to head it in.
Yes.
Right, and then that evolved into more intricate play, more positional interchange, more rotation, right? And that's how the game is going. The game is going towards that. Even like an England, right, where again similar to the old style German, like traditional England is like fast wingers that can cross the ball, two big guys in the box, cross it.
But not anymore.
Right. That's not the case anymore.
Yeah.
Right. So you've got wingers that can play inside. You've got
even Kane can go high. He can come deep.
Right.
He comes deep a lot too.
So you've got a game where, consistently across the board, you've got players that are more well-rounded.
And I think, like you said also, which actually makes a lot of sense, is even if you have a player specialize in one position in training, you're making sure that they get practice and that's not dependent on one position.
Yes.
So I think that gives them plenty of practice to understand the concept of spacing, where to be depending on where defenders are, and all of that. And just to sum this up, if you could give us a little bit of detail in terms of speaking to a parent, because obviously in youth soccer in America, speaking, unlike other places, speaking to parents is a huge part of it. So like how do you address this situation with parents?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is when you're taking your kid to a coach, there's got to be a level of trust. Once you trust, right, that the coach is doing what's best for your son, right? Because as a youth coach, you've got to do what's best by the player, not what's best by the team. I think that's but at times, what's best for the player is best for the team.
Wait, hold on.
So
you said, because this is different than what most people say. And I could learn from this too, but you said do what's best for the player, not for the team. What do you mean by that?
I think there are certain decisions that split, right? There's certain decisions that what's best for the player is not what's best for the team.
So how do you determine, like, I know it's hard to give specifics now, but in what situation, if you know off the top of your head, is a player decision more important than the team? Like to go that way.
For example, and I can give you like both sides of it, right? So if there's a kid who is a center back, right? He's playing as a center back for the most part.
Okay.
Right? For the most part, he plays as a center back. And let's say he's U12. Okay. U12 center back, and he's struggling to mark their forward. Struggling to mark their forward. Right? He's ran past them twice, scored twice. Okay. We're down 2-0. Okay. Now, I've got a fast striker at the front.
Okay.
And I know if I put him there at the back,
he's going to stop him.
I think maybe he's going to neutralize him.
Yeah, because of his speed.
So what's better for the team in terms of the result
is for him to go there.
Might be for that striker to go at the back.
Correct.
But what's better for that center back is to figure out how to, with his skill, stop that other kid.
I see.
So am I going to take that away from that kid?
So that's when the players are more important than the team result.
There, you have to balance these things.
Yeah.
I think sometimes if the kid's ready for the challenge and you're going to put him in a position to succeed, right? Like I might say, because you need to fail before you succeed. So that kid might fail twice, like 2 balls in behind, got caught ball watching twice. The kid wasn't, you didn't give him enough space. Maybe he received it and then he stepped and then the kid was gone, right? So now you need to give him a chance to succeed, right? Is the right thing to take him out for the team? Maybe. But for him, it's better to coach him through that. Hey, stay in it. You got this. Let's go. Come on. Hey, the next one, just on his touch, close him down. Yeah. Don't wait too long. Close him down. And he might make another mistake, but that's where the teaching, those are the teaching moments where kids really make leaps, right?
Yeah.
Like if you can coach them through those moments rather than, oh, let's change the formation and move somebody here, move somebody there, right? To
Yeah.
make it easier.
Yeah.
Not helping them.
And I like that you gave that example. That makes a lot of sense because sometimes I do that too, but I don't realize it's the player above the team. And I know I interrupted real quick, but if you could go back, I know you had said building trust within the parent, and then that parent has to trust that you're doing the best for the player.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a fundamental part of any coach-player relationship is trust, right? And I think decisions can be complex. There's a lot of different components for a coach to consider, right? Because there's all these different players, all their development, all the family logistics around it, right? Their trajectory, right? Like what's their next step in their career, right? Whether it's they're going to be on the team next year, whether they're not, right? Like you even see it at the top level when like Luis Enrique, all of a sudden now that he knows Mbappe is going, now he's playing him less. He's taking him out, right? That also plays a component in youth soccer because I've got to think about, okay, if you're going and I have to replace you next year, maybe now I have to start developing that other player, right? So there's all these decisions that you have to make. But I think ultimately, right, the player is not going to be able to, number one, know everything that the coach knows. And then number two, perceive it the same way, like perceive it with, everyone's interest. Because yes, like the player's interest is first before the team. But there's a lot of players. So all those guys' interests are at the same level. So you've got to make tough decisions at times.
Yeah.
So, if you don't trust the coach from the first go, it's not going to work.
So are you someone in the sense that if I feel that this player or that this parent doesn't have my trust, then why even convince them?
Well, no. I think there comes a point where, look, this parent doesn't think that I have their kid's best interest at heart, right? I make a decision and they're questioning it, right? I think that there comes a point where you have to just part ways.
Okay.
Right? Because if they don't feel like you're doing what's best by their kid, then how can I help them?
Yeah.
Because they're going to be at home saying, hey, coach, it's not fair that you're playing in this position when this and that. If that's what's in your head, that's going to manifest on the field. 100%. It's better if you go to someone else 100%. That is aligned with you.
Yeah, and one of
yeah.
And one of the things that I like before I close out is I like that you say it depends, because it really does depend, and then you give a scenario where it could be different. But I really like that. Yeah.
I think there's a player, just a good example of how playing multiple positions is beneficial, right? His name is Alex Gomez, and I had him at Cedar Stars when he was 8 years old. Started at U9, and so when he first came in, right, he was like what you said, good tackler, right? Good at a lot of things, but relative to the group, right, he wasn't near the top of the group in passing, dribbling, shooting, any of that. He wasn't near the top of the group. He was at the top of the group in terms of tackling. Yeah. Right. So at the beginning, right, he played at the back. Okay. Right. And to this day, he plays at the back. Right. But as he was developing, he played as a midfielder. He played as a winger. Right. He played in different spots, right, at U10, U11, U12, because that was going to help him develop different skills, right? Now, right, fast forward, he plays for New York Red Bulls U15s, right? He played on the U.S. national team when they went to Portugal for a tournament in late last year, in 2023. And he played up in the Red Bulls team that won the U15 national title last year. Okay. In that team, he played as a center back, playing up. Yeah. Right? Playing up, played as a center back. It's not the biggest. Yeah. Compared to everybody else on the field. He's athletic, he's a physical presence, he's tenacious. Plays there as a right back. The national team doesn't see him as a center back, sees him more as a right back.
Yeah.
because they don't feel he's tall enough to be a center back, and that's their, that's a national team program.
Yeah.
That's their choice. But if he wasn't able to fly up the right side and cross the ball, which he learned when he played as a winger, then he wouldn't be in the national team picture.
Yeah.
Right? So the national team scouted him, watching him play as a center back.
But they don't put him there.
But they don't play him as a center back.
Wow, that's interesting.
Right? So just a good, example of you've got to be well-rounded, because even he's a center back in a U15 MLS Cup winning team, right? MLS Next Cup winning team. And the national team scouted him not to play him at center back, to play him at right wing back.
Right, that's very interesting, because they're two different skill sets as far as a center back and a right back.
Yeah, and obviously there's things that overlap.
Correct.
That's where when you're well-rounded, you can kind of capitalize on your tenaciousness and you're winning the ball in the air. All of a sudden you have all these things that you can do well.
Correct.
And now for them, they look at it and they see, well, I have a guy that's as good as defending as a center back. I'm playing right back, so we're going to be super solid defensively. And he's also got ability to go forward. Yeah. Right? So I think that's where... Yeah.
Okay. All right, that's it. That's all we have on Ivo Toka. Stay tuned. Awesome.